Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or BlockchainBrad, and on behalf of BlockVera, which stands for Truth, Trust and Transparency, we have once again the CEO of Quant Network. His name is Gilbert Verdian. Gil, thank you very much for your time today.
Hi, Brad. Yeah, thank you. It's great to be back.
Likewise, mate. It's great to catch up with you once again. Now, for all those who want to know, this is entirely free. There is no hidden agenda. The idea is to provide all of you with a clear and concise update for the Quant Network, and Gil is here specifically to do that. So once again, thank you for your time, Gil. Now, I want to get straight into the crux of Quant Network. Once again, we'll skip all of the fundamentals and what you are, because we've done that before, Gil. But I just wanted to do the update for the operating system itself of Overledger. That's the secret sauce that you have. Give us an update on how everything's going, how the quality of the tech, and what you're building so far.
Yeah, no, it's going really well. So we set out to build the first versions of Overledger, and we did that all last year. This year has been enhancing it, and we've built a further version that works to the market, to what our enterprise clients want, and that has helped us also shape the Overledger network, because we've abstracted the architecture to be more modular and more flexible, and it's future-proofing how Overledger is going to be in the future. It's making it ready for the next stage. We've been busy doing a lot of work and connecting. We did the testnets first, the internal testnets. We've now connected all the public testnets. So the Overledger community version has connectivity to. I think by the time this is published, but it'll be aired. We've done Ethereum, the public testnet, which is Ropsten. We've also done Ripple, and so we're already connecting to Ripple today. We haven't announced it yet, but that will be by the time this thing is live.
Okay.
And we're also getting Bitcoin as well, and that includes then switching the testnet into Mainnet. So all the community version, all the developers that are using Overledger community will be able to use all the live Mainnets.
And what does that mean, Gil, to make that switch, mate, into Mainnet? What does it mean for both your technology of Overledger and just of the Quant Network itself?
It means that everyone has a choice. So you can actually start developing in a nice sandbox in an internal testnet, and you can do stuff. And there's a lot of enterprise clients that have been doing that with the current version. Then you can actually then switch to the public permissionless testnets. And so what it means, for the first time, you can take an internal Hyperledger and a Corda and an internal Ethereum, which is used for your enterprise or for your bank, and you're doing stuff. You can safely then connect that to the public permissionless blockchains through Overledger. So you don't have to go and spin up nodes and put all that stuff in your perimeter and do all the complex stuff of connecting, which is very difficult and very risk averse for enterprise. They will not go full blockchain nodes and everything within their corporate environments because of compliance, security, and risk. And so what we're allowing institutions and banks and enterprise to do is use their internal permission networks and allow them, those blockchains, to connect to the public permissionless blockchains safely. So I don't have to worry about all those complexity and all the rules. So it's kind of a world first, because they've been very hesitant to go public on permissionless blockchains. And we're allowing them to do that safely in a very controlled, secure manner through Overledger.
Right, so, and Gil, in that respect, if I can just jump in, what does it mean for institutional interest and for those parties to really integrate utilising technology like this? Because we hear the narrative every day about at some point there'll be more evidence empirically of institutions coming in. Are you part of that solution?
Yeah, we're shaping that, and we're giving institutional banks, financial institutions, access to different types of blockchains in a secure way that they're used to. And so, I don't know if you've seen, but last week Santander did the first bond on the public Ethereum network, and I was speaking to the MD of that. So I was speaking to John Whelan last week at Cybos about it, and he said, blockchain is here, the game has changed, and there's a lot more appetite to go on public permissionless blockchains today than there were a year ago, even 6 months ago. And it comes down to a few things. It gives them access to new markets, new customers, and new ways of doing things. But the institutional guys are getting the extra benefit of consensus across all the different nodes on a public blockchain, which they can trust. Whereas if you connect an internal to another internal, who controls the network, who's doing the nodes, who's doing the consensus, there's a lot of questions. But if you're putting it on a public permissionless blockchain, it number one has high availability. So Ethereum is always up. It may slow down, because of CryptoKitties or whatever.
Right.
But from an availability perspective, you're always going to have the live network to write to, and that's added and with the consensus and the integrity on top.
Right.
So it gives them the ability to do things. So Santander was one of the first to publicly do this, and they picked Ethereum for that reason.
I see. So, well, let's talk about some of the other public and permissionless systems or blockchains that you may be able to integrate in the future. Obviously, Gil, you're looking that direction for expansion because you are agnostic by design. You already mentioned some of those prominent first layer blockchains, but what's coming in the future for more scalable solutions that you can integrate with?
Yeah, so I mean, we're doing this based on market demand, and our view was always enterprise first. So we've solved interoperability for the private permission, the enterprise blockchain, the private permission blockchains. So we've done Hyperledger, Quorum, Ethereum, Ripple. So that's great for our enterprise customers because most of them use that. Mm-hmm. For the public ones, we started with the Testnet, which is Ropsten on Ethereum, and the Bitcoin one. So we've done Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Ripple. Mm-hmm. And we're just adding the rest because we have connectivity to the 11 chains that we support. So we're adding more as we progress and as we evolve Overledger. So It just allows it's the network of networks. It allows everyone to pick and choose what you want: an internal one to talk to an external blockchain. You want Ethereum to talk to Quorum. You want Hyperledger to talk to Ripple. We can do all that today.
Right. Well, obviously it's expanding as well, Gil, given that, the possibilities for more to come, I would imagine. Let's move it back though to enterprise, because that is because you're fundamentally a business. Talk us through some of those key enterprise developments that you've made. Obviously there are significant partnerships that we have spoken about in the past, but just to clarify to the listener, just how serious and how important and integral these enterprise partnerships are. Yeah.
So for us, we have more enterprises approaching us because they've heard about us and they know about us, and we have a very healthy pipeline. We have client meetings almost every day, even if it's a new client or an inquiry or existing clients, and we're actively working on their engagements. So every day we're working on SIA, we're working on AX trading. So we're making digital assets and interoperability happen for the enterprise market, which is one of the biggest barriers they've had. And then tied to that, we've met with so many new customers in Cybos last week. It was a great event because everyone was there. We met about 30 new customers, all banks. We met central banks, where we're doing some work with central banks now, which is huge. I mean, this area, you wouldn't hear about central banks talking about digital assets or even mentioning the word Bitcoin. Right? Well,
let's open the conversation up, Gil, because you're always open to do that. Now you talk about institutions really having the conversation because you have that world-class, world-first technology being Overledger. What names can you give us? Not to FOMO, because I want to make this clear. It's not about trying to push prices with Quant, not at all, but it's to try and get us to understand the connection between the enterprise and the institutions and you, because they're willing to have that conversation finally. The other question I want to pose is, are you that first conduit we can see evidenced in this crypto domain that does actually authentically bridge that kind of business world and the crypto world? Are you really enabling institutional investment today in blockchain and in blockchain business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, we solve a pain point that they have, and the pain point is, I like blockchain. I like using it. It creates new markets for us. It creates new customers and new revenue for a bank or an institution. But they don't know which one to use, and they don't know, is it the right one? Or if we use blockchain A, is that going to be the right one for the next 2 years? We don't know. So we give them the choice. I mean, we've spoken to the likes. In terms of technology companies, we've spoken to the likes of HCL, which I mentioned, I think it was last time, that they're a big outsourcer system integrator. We've spoken to Infosys. They came and approached us at Cybos, which was just as big. We've spoken to Fujitsu, even similar approach, their technology provider. And of course, Oracle. I mean, Oracle, we're fintech partners of Oracle, and they're actively taking our technology to their customers. And even last week, we spoke to the Oracle team up in Sweden, and there's a Nordic, central bank that wants to use this type of technology. So we're going to that central bank with Oracle.
Right.
So we're not partnering with anyone and anyone, right? So we're partnering with the companies that have the relationships, and their clients are the institutions, banks, central banks, and we're jointly taking our technology to them, because that's something the client needs, and it's a compelling proposition, because you've got someone, the size of Oracle, the size of Fujitsu or HCL, taking this to their customers, and so. Yeah, I mean, that's a small example. We've met
I think you have more, Gil. Give us a few more names, because I think there's more to come. We talked about SIA. I remember last time. That's a huge example of some of those, interconnections with banks, banking networks. So clearly, in that sector alone, there's a lot more since we spoke last, and even in any other verticals of business as well.
Yeah. We are financial services focused. So SIA's a great example, and we had a good chat at Cybos, because they had a stand, we were in the Oracle stand, and we work together every day. So it was the same team that we always work with, and so there's a lot of opportunity. We even had, while we were discussing, one of the banks approached SIA and said, we want to work with you guys on SIA Chain. We've heard so much about it, and they're a big global bank, and it was a great opportunity to go and talk to them about that at Cybos. So as I was saying, there's a lot of interest. That there's a new area that we really didn't foresee, which was quite exciting, but was trade finance. And if you think about consortiums like WeTrade and Marco Polo and Voltron, they all need all the participants to be part of the network. And so you have to be part of the WeTrade network. You have to be part of the other one, Marco Polo network. One of the problems the banks have is, okay, that's fine. I can get access to all these new customers that are part of this network, but what about the other customers that are not on the network? There's more of them. And so we met a couple of the banks and said, this is what we do, and we're having follow-up meetings with them, because the banks want WeTrade and Marco Polo and Voltron and all the other trade finance platforms to interoperate. And that's what we're going to be working on, which is huge. I mean, that's just facilitating global trade.
Well, clearly, Gil, there's a huge scope, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but just listening to some of those names that you've rattled off that we hadn't heard of, Fujitsu, for example, and the many of the banks that we don't yet know, and perhaps you don't even yet know for the future of your company. Does it excite you, quite sincerely, that you're starting to really evidence, as the CEO, proof that you are now able to bridge that enterprise world, that institutional sector, and as I was mentioning, crypto, when for the most part, much of crypto is still very speculative? Do you see that there's a chasm building where on one side we have the speculation, on the other side we just simply have, to be frank, blockchain business happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the middle of as I keep saying, re-architecting the financial system, and we're shaping it. We're right at the forefront. The stuff that we're doing with central banks is going to be huge, and that's around November that we can talk about it. And that's allowing interoperability of digital assets for central banks. And you've seen, and I've been talking about central bank digital currencies on my Twitter. So I've got a whole thread, I think, about 8 messages.
Yes, I've seen that. And Gil, with that banking aspect in November, are we talking about at a global scale, something to really change the game?
Yeah. It's something that we met one of the central banks at Cybos. We had a good meeting. They even put their Quant stickers on their laptops. We gave everyone stickers. And so, they love what we do, and it solves a big problem for them. But it really changes the game in financial services. Having central banks use digital assets and have interoperability. I mean, that's amazing. It's never been done before at this scale.
Right. Well, I'll be definitely calling you in November.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. Okay. Well, let's move back to some of the tech talk, Gil, and then we can keep going, because I'll make sure we don't miss any of the key business aspects. Now, one of the community members wanted to find out about the dashboard updates with regard to how the ease of use of that. What updates have you made to the technology so that it's easy for all parties to engage in the technology?
Sorry, in terms of which dashboard? Sorry,
well, you have a dashboard essentially with Overledger so that people can,
yes,
interact with the ecosystem and make it easy. So it's really just a question of ease of use. Have you made sure you've continued to develop the tech so that it continues to be very seamless?
Yeah, I mean, we can sign up companies and organizations, developers on our developer portal, and that's we're constantly evolving that, and we're even thinking of just scrapping the current one and creating a completely new one, which has a lot of self-service automation built in. So everything just happens. You just get on with it, similar like an e-commerce site. You just buy, add to cart, done, and then it's sorted. So this is something that we've been working on, but we're getting everything ready for Overledger Network, because that all has to be automated. At the end of the day, every participant and stakeholder of the network should be able to run and work on the gateways, do the tokens and all the stuff around lockup and automatically, and the Overledger network handles that on its own. So there'll be no involvement from us. So we're making that as hyper decentralized is the word I use, I think, in one of the talks.
Yes, you have.
As automated and hyper decentralized as possible. And so that's coming. So we're evolving what we've got into the next level.
Okay.
And that's I think Q1, Q2 next year that we said.
Okay. Now, with regard to some other partnerships, I wanted to take it more to the global scale and be specific. So areas like China, for example, there's been references through your social media, particularly on Twitter, just with a focus on certain things such as JBI, Ministry of Commerce. So are you looking at any specific regions right now, Gil, to bolster business in those regions?
Yeah, so it really is client driven, and so right now we've always been UK Europe focused. We have an announcement coming out of Australia shortly.
How about now?
So
let's just do it
right now. No, shortly you'll see.
Okay.
So that should be in the next when are we doing it? And in the next month, we should have that. But we're also doing something else in sustainability. That's another announcement, which is all for the greater good. And they're using our technology to help with sustainability challenges and supply chain. And that's a global thing, which I think it's in next week that should come out.
Okay.
So we're talking to the likes of journalists and Cointelegraph and that sort of thing about it. So that should be out next week. And now technology is helping solve that sustainability, climate issues and that sort of thing. So so there's that, and there's more coming. I mean, we will push stuff out, but our focus has been Europe. But we are doing a lot in the US now.
Right. Well, Gil, let's talk about Armenia for a moment, because obviously, there's a connection there, and even, move across to the US at the end of that, because I'd love to know more about what you are focusing on in the future with the US, given they are such a stronghold in the world economy. So we can see that you're looking at localized development in Armenia and then more globally. Yeah,
we're setting up our research center there. And so we've got some people that we've been interviewing and we really like, and they're going to join. And so we're going to have an office and a team there. And the guys that are joining have a cryptography background. And so this is, from a pure security cryptography perspective, it's what we can do on top of Overledger to comply, for all the banks that are using it, to comply to their requirements and to their standards. But doing it at a hyper decentralized way. So, keys can be managed, by the network. The way that they're doing encryption and the signing of all the digital assets can be done in the most secure way with the most encryption. And so this is exciting, because I'm going to be there next week actually for a huge conference, which I didn't realize how big it was, but there's I don't know, 3,000 to 6,000 people that go, and Bill Gates spoke at it last year, and I'm speaking at it this year, which is so exciting.
Wow, it's all around. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's called WCIT, and it moves around in all these countries every year. And this year it's in Armenia.
Yes, I read that Bill Clinton's also been involved as well. I also had heard that he's been involved with some other startups as well, such as Ripple, I believe. But does it excite you that you're getting that kind of reach? Not just in enterprise, but even moving and merging into government sectors as well, Gil?
Yeah, we're across a lot of governments, from our background, but we're shaping the thinking for blockchain, and from a regulation perspective, shaping the regulation. I mean, the stuff I can say the stuff that I saw recently from the Fed was work that I did about 2 years ago when I'm in the committees at the Fed, when I brought a lot of the thinking and the policy that we had in the UK around payments and fraud detection and open banking. And I brought that to the Fed in the task force that I was on. And now that's happened. It's become real. So it's great to see, shaping US policy, from the thinking and the experience that we've had. So yeah, as I said, we're re-architecting and shaping the system.
Okay, well, let's move across the US, because I know you're very tight-lipped about it. Clearly, there's plans for the future with that region for Quant Network. Can you give us a bit of a hint, though, Gil, of just how serious you are taking that marketplace and what you can actually do in that region to, I guess, integrate and introduce your technology to that space?
Yeah, so what we've solved is something that's been holding back the market. And if you think about digital assets, right? So people have been trying to do swaps on digital assets, and it's been limited. To be frank, the technology has been limited. I mean, having atomic swaps, which is like a hash lock, it's not the way. It's not the institutional way. I mean, can you imagine a stock on the Nasdaq? You can only swap it between party A and party B, and you can't do anything else with it. It doesn't go to any institutions, no custody holders or whatever.
No.
So we're limited. The technology has been limited because the approach to it has been limited. The holy grail is to do cross-chain digital asset swaps, and that's what we're doing with AX trading. So if you think about it, capital markets are going to change because there's going to be new types of instruments, and it's not just a bond or a debenture or a stock or whatever. Now you've got digital assets that represent something else, and so there's more liquidity. There's more opportunity to carve up traditional assets and instruments and digitize them as a digital asset and then trade them across different systems and platforms. And,
right. So Gil, what does that mean? So, what does that mean for you, for Quant Network, with regard to the AX trading you mentioned? Because obviously that's a key development, and also that mainstream financial sector, particularly mainstream exchanges, for example, integrating with current financial networks that already exist.
Yeah, so we're shaping Wall Street, simply put, and what this means is people like Gemini and they've been trying to become institutionalized, right? And they're trying to go and become a registered SEC FINRA dealer, broker dealer.
Certainly trying.
And trying and. If you come from that space, it's very difficult because you can create a new exchange, a traditional exchange. You can go get all the regulatory licenses and whatever, which takes years. We've seen that, that they've been all quite difficult to get there. And then you have to go and knock on the door of institutions and say, hi, we're a new exchange. Do you want to use us in line with what you're doing with NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange? Can you use our exchange as well? That's pretty hard. That's a hard sell. So we've done the opposite. So instead of going door to door, we've gone and partnered with a traditional exchange. So AX Trading already has 800 institutional traders. They're already connected.
Okay.
The connector's already there. So this is all of Wall Street, and they've got connectivity to Euroclear here in Europe. So if you think about it, this is it. This is the whole financial capital markets structure.
So through that trading platform, you're tapped in already.
We're connected to all of them, so we don't have to go to 800 banks and institutions and trading houses and go, can you connect to us? Can you use us? Can you use us? They already use it. I mean, AX trading has been running for years, and what we're doing is we're allowing digital asset interoperability at scale. For the first time, you can actually move stuff between 800 institutions. There's more that will connect, and you can trade different instruments like a stock or something else, but also the digital asset as well, or representation.
So what could that mean, Gil, for the Quant Network in terms of value, in terms of expansion, in terms of just business? Given that you have this pluggability now with a trading platform that's already got the door open to a vast network itself, what does it mean to have that first mover advantage?
Yeah, it's kind of like we're the infrastructure to enable this to happen, and so our code and our technology will be running kind of, if you think about it, Wall Street. It'll be running how institutions trade. It'll be running how people do settlements and stuff across networks, and how you can move a JP Morgan coin with a Wells Fargo coin. I mean, we can make that happen.
Do you think Wall Street are even aware of just how big not only the Quant Network, but just this technology is going to be and how relevant it's going to be in the future?
Yes, they have recognized, and I think it's only been in the last 6 months, 9 months, they have recognized the potential. They've been looking at it for the last couple of years, thinking, what is this? Is this good for us? Should we look at it? Now that they see the potential, and they're all in. I mean, it's reshaping how Wall Street operates, because it's not a technology benefit only. It's actually a business benefit. So you get access to more investors, more institutions, more assets, more markets,
right?
And so for them, it's a no-brainer.
And also the bottom line, I'd imagine too, Gil, essentially when it comes to cost savings, the blockchain enables, as we talked about previously, certain processes through audits, for example, that simply remove middlemen in many respects. But can we talk about now some of the developments you've made on the technology, on those protocols? One of them you call the map, as you know. You have about 55 apparently at the moment. How is the development going? How is the ecosystem building with regard to the maps?
Yeah, so this is our ecosystem. So we have developers building on our technology. Even this morning, actually, we had a university in Victoria in Australia approach us and said, "Can we buy Overledger because we want all our students to learn, but use it for their coursework and build stuff on it." So they're going to have their own Overledger instance building maps for all their students across the computer science courses that they do. And so it's growing. It's a growing ecosystem. We're catering for the enterprise side with the client engagements that we have, and then we're catering for the community and our ecosystem for people developing stuff. And this sustainability one is one of those. They've built an end-to-end sustainability product and a solution on the supply chain that's using Overledger completely. And
right.
They couldn't do this with any other technology. We're doing stuff in energy as well, which we've mentioned as well in the past, doing energy trade across networks. And there's other use cases that we keep hearing of people using it. People are forking our code and our SDKs to integrate it into other things, and we're seeing that on our GitHub. Which is great, and it just means the ecosystem is growing. So yeah, we're quite excited, and especially with Overledger networks next year, it's going to grow even more.
And Gil, does it surprise you the pace that things are moving? Obviously, crypto is a fast-moving industry in itself, but you particularly, each time we talk, it just seems like you're building quite a lot in the ecosystem, given the team is relatively small but focused. Do you anticipate significant growth in the next few years for Quant Network?
Yeah, absolutely. We're constantly hiring. I think on our website we've got, I don't know, 5-6 roles currently advertised. We always need more people, and we need the right type of people for this next level. We've just had Luke join us. Luke Riley, his academic background's super smart, running our innovation and labs and all the concepts that we have ideas. He figures out how to implement them and how to solve from a theory perspective, and then put it into code, and then we integrate the code into the technology. We've had another person join us recently, which we'll make an announcement shortly, but he's a corporate bank background, 25 years, and Steve, he's been in.
I was going to ask you about Steve, actually. So
yeah. So what we're doing is we've looked at Overledger, and we're creating Overledger Enterprise that specifically has more compliance, more security, more features that are in line with what the banks need. And so he's working on that as a project, and adding those features on top of the code. And so we're constantly growing. And now we're going to start looking for people in New York, and that's for the capital markets side. I think people with that depth and background to join us. And we only look at people who have minimum 10 plus years in a bank or financial services, and they come from that corporate background.
Right. Well, clearly, you're getting even more serious with the team you're building to reflect, what you want to be, which is essentially a long-term business. Now, interoperability is something that is overused in the space, Gil. There's no way around that. Some suggest that it's even in the context of Quant that perhaps it's this case. So, can you clarify to the audience just whether or not that word is the integral feature? Being interoperability, and what it means fundamentally for the entire ecosystem that you're building.
This is the problem that I saw, back in 2014 when in government, we're building blockchains in isolation, and it was frustrating me because why are we making those mistakes? So interoperability, when I set out to do this, founding the company back in 2015, which was September, I think it was back then. It was very, very early, but the right time to approach it. And what I wanted to do was to have a standard way to have different types of blockchain technologies to interoperate and intercommunicate with each other without adding something complex and making it as easy as sending a message from an Android phone to an iPhone. It just works. Like a Word file on a Mac just works on a Word file on a PC. It's the same. So it's having that interoperability. But what we've done since then is, we've created universal interoperability, allowing any network on a private permissioned blockchain to talk to any other network on a public permission network on a blockchain. Cross interoperability, but then integrating with existing systems. There's a whole world of enterprise platforms and enterprise systems that everyone uses. You don't turn that off. You need those things to operate. A bank cannot turn off their trade finance system or their FX hedging system and go blockchain tomorrow. They have to integrate with it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of workflows that they use.
And Gil, is it? Sorry to interrupt you, but is it fair to say that you're building that interoperability layer on top of essentially the internet itself? We talked about TCP/IP several times in the past, but with regard to utilizing and maximizing the protocol itself, you're building that overlay, that overledger on top. So is it fair to say you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but maximizing the productivity of the internet systems in new ways?
Yeah, I mean, we complement what already exists, which is quite key. So it's very difficult to go and do a full transformation and rip out everything and start again. What we're saying is keep what you've got. We'll sit on top of it as Overledger and integrate into it and complement your existing infrastructure to make it simpler to move to blockchain. Got it.
So Phil, sorry, Gil, in that sense, what about those that are establishing their new protocols? I was speaking with Toto Protocol recently in Toto Network. What they've done is establish their own IP system or their own, what they call is the equivalent to a TCP/IP. Do you see that there's any challenges or any competition out there, given that you're utilizing what already exists, as you said, and integrating and making things more interconnected, interoperable? Do you see that there's a space in the ecosystem for more competitors, or are you focused on being that one-stop shop, that one key conduit for this new internet system?
Yeah, I mean, look, the blockchain is in its infancy. Gartner in 2018 said until we have mass adoption, it'll be 5 years. In 2019, they said the same, it'll be 5 years. So we're at the beginning of building, the infrastructure for the future. And yeah, there's going to be multiple versions. There's going to be multiple technologies, but they all need to talk to each other. Similarly, there's Android phones made by Samsung. There's Android phones made by Huawei, and there's iPhones made by Apple. They all need to talk to each other. No one's got the one phone for everyone.
Right.
It's the same in technology. You can't have the one technology for everything. You need choice.
Makes sense. Now, mate, with regard to corporate, focus, can you give us a bit of an overview of the timeline and also of the roadmap with regard to any key milestones that you want to just mention, knowing that the CEO and you plan some of these things out for the future?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is, we service our clients the way we do, and every engagement's different, and we work with them, for 6 months, for 12 months, whatever the timeline is, right? But the focus now is we're really working on Overledger Network, and this is all creating that network of networks, having the Overledger gateways out, and there's a opportunity to be part of that. So we've registered, created a registration on the site and people are already registering. We want to have 1,000 nodes hosting Overledger gateways next year sometime, and it'll be great. So once this is out, it gives anyone in the public who wants to be part of the network to do that, but also it gives enterprise the opportunity to be part of the network, and that's quite key, because they can have their own Overledger gateway, which is controlled, managed. It's within their environment. It could be in the DMZ. It's just up to them. And they get access to all different blockchains, and they get access to the network of networks.
So that's what sets you apart also, because you've built that community aspect into the gateway system. And I want to talk about that more, if that's okay, Gil, in a moment. But before we do, can we just briefly touch on anything else with regard to institutional government or the private sector, just to make sure that I have fully addressed that area, because you always have a lot to say in those arenas, because that's where your focus is, being enterprise driven. Is there anything else, to add to the business side before we move into the gateways?
Yeah, I think, blockchain is here, and everyone has recognized that, and everyone is actively implementing it because they see the potential. And so I don't know any company that hasn't talked blockchain. I mean, I went, to all the banks at CyWAS, and I just said, can I talk to someone, in your bank and who's looking at blockchain? And there's always someone looking at it. And we met with, the Bank of China, we met with the Construction Bank of China, we met with, Danske Bank, Standard Chartered, all the banks were there, and everyone that we approached had blockchain on their agenda, on their roadmap, and they're using it day to day. There's a difference in trying it and going into production, and that's where we are now. So a lot of the banks have been trying, and governments, they've been trying in pilots and proof of concepts, but then they just die. It's like, yeah, that's great. It was a good pilot. We don't need it. But that's changed. So there's a thing called path to production. So a lot of the institutions and the banks are actually putting in these technologies live in production, used by their users. And you don't know it, and it runs on blockchain. And that's what we're seeing this year. So all of these banks have, speaking to the MD at Santander, HSBC, SocGen, they're all using blockchain day to day. And they're going live with it, which is the big difference. Once you go live, that's it. You're in production. So,
Gil, paint us a picture of banking, in relation to Quant Network for a moment. Just the scope, that you envisage in the next year, say. I know it's difficult to predict things, but what's the kind of number and scope of the banking sector and the number of banks that you foresee working with Quant Network? The reason I ask is because we talked about SIA before. We talked about the 570 connected to SIA alone. And a lot of people, created FUD about that, suggesting that, the SIA network is its own entity, and, but the reality is it was real. There was a real banking network. So what's the kind of scope, given that SIA was just one of many potential partners in the banking sector?
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand financial services, at that level, and they don't understand, financial infrastructure. How does the whole finance system operate and work? And once you know that, then it makes sense. So, for us, we've gone down the network path. With the AX trading, that's the capital market infrastructure, that's the capital market network. With SIA, it's the banking network, it's the financial network. We're working with banks on an individual use case basis, and we're working with the networks that they all use because they need to all do payments and they need to do KYC, notarization, etc.
So what other networks like SIA
can
you teach us about, Gil? Because you taught me about SIA when we spoke last. What other banking networks do you know about that you could technically work with, or that you are actually engaging in conversations with to work with in the future?
Well, there's lots. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem on payments. The payment networks are either domestic, which is run by the central bank, or it's actually run by a provider to the central bank, which is what we have in the UK. In the US, the Fed doesn't run the payment system. There's actually a few entities. So ACH is one, which is clearinghouse. There's TCH, which is the clearinghouse, which is what I put in as the CISO in my previous role. So, and there's 14,000 banks in the US. And then you've got other traditional payments like checks, and then you've got the card networks. So you've got, Amex and Visa, MasterCard, Diners. So there are other payment networks that all the banks use and they're connected to. And then on top of that, you've got cross-border. So how do you do remittance between different, domestic entities or international entities?
So, Gil, do you want to interconnect all of them? Do you fundamentally want to work with all those different components that drive a universal global banking network?
Yeah. So our approach is we've covered financial infrastructure with SIA in Europe. So that gave us huge coverage and huge access to the number of participants. We've done the same in capital markets, in financial markets infrastructure, FMI. And that's the 800 plus institutions with AX. And next, what we're looking at is payment networks, and so that's another network just as big, thousands of participants, etc. And we're working on that next because our technology caters for that as well. Right.
Well, Gil, to do that, you need to have significant connections with governments. Let's not downplay that as well. You have substantial clout there, and we've talked about why in the past. But what kinds of government parties are you talking to now, and in what regions that you're focused on now to build out that sort of first phase even more?
We're quite involved across a number of governments. The latest one that we've been helping with is open banking in Australia. So we're part of the fintech policy forum, I think it's called, and we've helped put the response back to the government there, and allowing, it's called consumer data rights, which is basically open banking, but in the Australian market.
Right.
And so we're helping shape the government thinking and the policy on that. And in Europe and UK, across the ECB, we talk a lot, and there's a lot of meetings that we're at. And so, the conference that I was at, I think it was June or July, a lot of good discussions from the ECB and then other central banks over there as well. I mean, the panel that I was on had the supervisor from the Bank of Italy. So, we know each other, we talk a lot, and we do a lot of work on things on policy and thinking. A lot of the government, agencies and departments just ask, what do you think if we do this? And they just want a sounding board. And they want to be able to kind of, make sense of their thinking and the policy, and being in that space and coming from that space. It's just, experience and knowledge. And I just, share, well, you should do this, you should do that, you should do, X, or you shouldn't do Y. And they go off and take the feedback, which is great because we're peers, coming from that world.
Well, clearly you have, as I said, a lot of connections in the sort of government sector, in various regions around the world. But moving now to gateways, because there's a lot of people who don't perhaps understand that you've built in that community aspect to the gateway model, and you have that enterprise part to do with it. So can you talk us through the imperative of having that permissionless and permission component built into the gateways? And then can you talk us through the reward system and what are the costs associated with the community member who may, in fact, engage as a node operator utilizing the gateway system?
Yes, so it's all about creating the ecosystem and allowing participants and stakeholders to be part of the ecosystem. So the Overledger network is designed to allow anyone to host their own Overledger gateway, and there's different tiers of gateways as well. So we've made it quite flexible, and what we see is a way where if we have the network of networks, we have all the participants using it. And you have the opportunity to, you can earn transaction fees of all the transactions that go through your gateway. Mm-hmm. And so the way we've done it is 3 tiers. So if you have a gateway, and you can host your own connections to blockchain nodes. So you can have a gateway, on a server somewhere, and you're part of the network. You can put Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Ripple nodes on there. And that gateway will get a priority because you're hosting nodes, so more transactions can come through your gateway because of that. And so the second tier is if you have one blockchain node, or the third tier is you don't have any nodes. You're just you're the interconnect and the gateway in the Overledger network.
Right.
So we're allowing people to earn a percentage of all the transactions that come through their gateway, because they're putting it up in terms of compute and bandwidth and storage, from a concept point of view, it's almost like a peer-to-peer network, and there's traffic flowing through all the different types of nodes and gateways on the network.
And it's great that you're also engaged in the community, and you haven't precluded them from access to the gateways because you have the enterprise feature built in. But Gil, what are the costs involved? Like, say I want to create a gateway and interconnect with the network itself. What do I have to put up, with regard to Quant?
Yeah, so the initial thought that we had and the thinking that we've been working on the design is 500 Quant each year. So you can put that up, and that's your your fee to join the gateway, and then you earn the transactions that go through. You can earn a percentage of that comes through, and the more people use the gateway, the more enterprise use it, or more public applications use it, then there's more transactions flowing through the network. So,
and will that be fees will that be fees, Gil, that just run through the Overledger system through that network? Can you talk us through specifically where those fees come from, so people are aware?
Yeah, of course. So every single transaction going through Overledger has to be, people have to have Quant in their wallets. We're even putting a minimum mandatory requirement of that. So all the participants of the network have to hold Quant, and that gives you access to the network. And it's used for security. We're using Quant to sign all and verify all the transactions that go through Overledger. If you don't have that, it will not go through the Overledger network. You'll be dropped. Mm-hmm. And so everyone has to have Quant, and then the transaction costs of what is going through the network has to be paid in Quant as well. So if you're doing 1,000 transactions or 10 million transactions, you have to pay that in Quant, and that's that's part of the utility model that we've got.
Right.
And then it's the same for enterprise. It's no different to someone in their bedroom developing stuff, and someone who's an enterprise developing a big application that they uses Overledger and uses the network.
So Gil, how can we make sure that those who put up that 500 Quant as the suggested amount can essentially make that money back? Because obviously they're putting it up and they have that belief in and value in the gateway as a community gateway representative. So how can they essentially ensure that they're going to get their money back, to be frank?
Well, I can't guarantee that. No one in the world can. I mean, you never know what you're putting up. What we hope to do is to create the ecosystem and bring that mass usage to the ecosystem and the network of networks. And we're doing that with the community model and the enterprise model. So when Ethereum was built, no one knew how many people would use Ethereum. No one knew how many nodes of Ethereum would be. You plan to get to that level, and that's what we're doing. It's all about mass adoption, mass implementation of our technology, and the more usage of it, then the more participants and the bigger ecosystem.
And Gil, what about the cost of the hardware? Is that included in that amount that's you've proposed or suggested for those who essentially want to engage and run that gateway?
No, it's the same model as, if you want to connect to, become part of the Ethereum node, or you want to do that on Cosmos or whatever, you have to install the node software on your own hardware. So it's all, you bring that to the table.
Mm-hmm. And can you essentially run more than one gateway?
Yeah, you can. Okay. It's up to you. Yep.
And what about the cost? That suggestion of the 500 quant, is that likely to change or be revisited in the future, or is that more just you're pretty confident that that's where it'll start?
Yeah, I mean, we'll revisit it based on market need, we can adjust it according to what the market needs. And if you think about Libra, they charge 10 million for an enterprise to connect to the Libra network.
They certainly did. And they had a very limited number.
26 participants or something along those lines. So we don't want to have that much of a barrier, but we want to open this up to allow anyone to be part of the network, including enterprise.
Well, I think a lot of people appreciate that. Now, how is the interest from the enterprise side with regard to the gateway skill? Have you had a plethora of interest already?
Yeah, I mean, we announced this last week, at Cybos, we even have, technology companies saying, why can't we be part of the network, and then we host a segment where we have all of the banks and all the institutions on our on our infrastructure, on our kit with the Overledger gateway, and they would trust us as a big technology brand that everyone knows, they can take the problem off an enterprise's hands. That's something. If you can imagine, large corporates hosting Overledger nodes on behalf of other banks, that's a great outcome.
Right, and Gil, it seems that also building this system that you have created with your team, it allays or it circumvents the needs for staking and those kinds of models that are more contentious when it comes to the SEC. So are you confident that you've built in a true utility model by having these gateways and obviously having the list of use cases for the token itself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from day one, we did everything with KPMG's support. They did all our compliance, regulation, taxation, and under FINMA guidelines, and that's what we've done. From the first day, our approach is in line, and to that advice and to the clearance that we have, and we haven't deviated from that. We're doing everything in accordance to what we set out right at the beginning.
Right. Okay. Now, I want to move across to the activity, the literal activity of the developers in your team, and even those outside of that, given the open source nature of blockchain. With regard to repos, GitHub activity, there's been some suggestions that at times there's been quite an inactive GitHub. Can you talk to us about any of that? Whether there's any truth in any of that, and how important is it that you are transparent with your GitHub?
I mean, we see a lot of, uneducated speculation on stuff because people just don't know how companies work. And so, we saw people saying, oh, there's no GitHub activity at all. And, that's not true. What we've published are our SDKs. And if you go into our GitHub, there's 2 that are published. And then we've got a tutorial. So there's 3 things that we publish. But we have, behind that, we have about, I think it's 106 other repositories that are private, and they're all what we use, for the company and for staff to develop Overledger and different components of the technology and the gateways, etc. That's something we're not publishing. I mean, there's no way you can go to Microsoft and go, give us your Windows source code. it doesn't happen.
Right.
But what we've published is all the public SDKs, and they're constantly updated. We've just updated SDKs a couple of weeks ago for Bitcoin, Mainnet, and Testnet connectivity. Ripple was done. Well, we haven't announced it yet, but it's all in the SDK. So if anyone looked, you would have noticed about 2 weeks ago there was a change, and that had all the Ripple code in there. And that's what we will publish. Only the stuff that's public. But having said that, we have plans to open source quite a bit of our technology. I can't tell you the specifics yet, but it's to allow anyone to not only use the SDKs, but use Overledger as an end-to-end protocol. So you can actually use it to do interoperability at scale. And that'll be an open source protocol, and there'll be another GitHub repository, the fourth one, and then we'll just keep updating that.
So when's that likely to happen? Because that could be even, that could really expedite the process of use of your ecosystem, because essentially you're moving beyond just the SDK, and then they can really start to do things independently.
Yeah, and so it's all in the roadmap with the gateways and what we're launching. So it's all about giving everyone the tools and access to the technology to build all the things that they need to build.
Right. Well, that's good to know, Gil. Now, talking about money for a moment, something that, you very rarely like to talk about, but with regard to revenue, understanding the correlations between your business and the business model, the success of the token, for example. Let's just first start with money with regard to how much you're making. I know you don't like to disclose too much, but are you firstly making money? Are you producing revenue? And has that been increasing month in, month out?
Yeah, so just to be frank, we're not a publicly listed company where we have to have quarterly reports and shareholder updates and that sort of thing. We're doing everything in line with what we have to do legally. So we don't comment on here's our profit, here's our PE ratio, here's the EBITDA and whatever. That doesn't get disclosed. What does disclose is what's public and what has to be from a compliance perspective with the authorities. We do all the usual stuff. So we don't need to tell anyone anything about the company's financials. But having said that, we have gone public. It was in the Forbes article saying we're in line with our revenue projections for the next year. We've had revenue from clients. We do all the enterprise focused stuff, and we have more clients that are paying clients lined up for the next year. So it is enterprise focused, and we're a business that is enterprise focused. The stuff around the tokens and the ecosystem, that's the community model. And yeah, that does with all the stuff that's flowing through it and whatever, that does eventually generate an extra set of revenue for us, but that's not everything.
Got it. Now, Gil, let's take the traditional model. We've seen, the typical model of equity and shareholders and dividends as that blockchain era. Now we see pre-utility and utility tokens emerging as a key means of, establishing a business, as you've shown. But do you foresee in the future some sort of development for Quant Network where you will have literal equity stakeholders, those that can partake in the business aspect of this beyond the pre-utility utility engine that's now literally fueling the success of the system that you've built?
No, short answer is no.
Okay. All right, that's good to know. Now let's move across to Oracle. It's literally flooded through your Twitter. It's something that clearly you're proud of, but I want to better understand this for the audience. Now, you suggest, and you've said this even in the interview, that it's a fintech partnership. It's a real deal partnership, but I want to understand it more in terms of the authenticity of this, the depth of this. How important has this Oracle connection been for Quant?
It's been immense, and they recognize the need to partner with innovative companies to take them to the next level. Because being a big company like Oracle, they've got something like 440,000 clients globally. It's hard for them to move quickly. And the best way they can actually be innovative and deliver stuff is to partner with small, fast, agile companies in fintech, which is what they're doing. So our partnership, we started out on the startup program, which was something they approached us. They vet all the participants. They have to meet a lot of criteria just to be part of it. And so we did that. That was last year sometime. And that went really well. We spoke to a lot of their account managers and sector leads, and there's a lot of opportunity to work with them that we're progressing. And then we took it up a level where Oracle recognized the potential for blockchain. I mean, they have the Oracle blockchain platform, which is based on Hyperledger. They have clients asking for it, and they recognized our technology can deliver what their clients need. I mean, they've got 400,000+ clients globally, so they're asking for this type of technology. So then we became a fintech partner, and it just means the Oracle teams are taking our technology to their clients, independently and with us as well on calls and on meetings. So the central bank in the Nordics region is one. We've had calls internally on financial services. We've had Oracle take us and introduce us to the banks that they work with at Sibos and said, you need to talk to these guys. They're one of our partners. So it's a very healthy relationship, and there's a lot. We're going to market together, which is
well. It sounds like it's reciprocally or mutually beneficial for both of you. But I do want to ask you directly, Gil. There's been some suggestions when I was doing the research for the interview from community members that there was a payment with regard to whether you're attending Sibos, for example. There was even figures of about $15,000 suggested to be part of a conference. Yeah, so I want to just clarify this so that we can understand, is your Oracle partnership long-term? Because there's been some suggestions as I was preparing for this interview that, it was actually more about a membership into an ecosystem rather than a very long-term, robust, real partnership.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm sorry, but just these people do not understand how companies work, simply put. No, we did not pay to go to Sibos. Oracle hosted and invited us. They took 5, startups with them as part of the stand that we had together. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, this is what I meant by the cowboy activity in this sector. Yeah, maybe, people see that type of activity, with a crypto exchange or some sort of fake crypto partnership, and people pay them to be partners, and, it's been exposed and people talk about it. In the corporate world, that's bribery. You don't do this sort of thing. There's regulation, there's corporate governance.
Well, you can appreciate, Gil, in the crypto space, all kinds of BS does happen. So I do appreciate your transparency and honesty. And obviously, I'm trying my best to ask those questions that are, in that background, in the noise, as you suggested. And there is a lot of noise, quite sincerely. But once again, I appreciate you addressing them. Now, you launched Overledger Net as well during this, this time with Sibos. So what does it mean to launch things like that? How does that advance Quant?
Yeah, it takes a lot of time and planning to do it. So we've been working on this for a while, and you do it at an appropriate platform, and Sibos was the right platform to do Overledger Network. So we've launched that to announce we're building the network to allow any participant of the network to have access to other networks, and that's the name of the game. We're here to allow interconnectivity and openness and giving people access to true hyper decentralization. And
can you give us some examples, though, Gil? Given that it was you announced this in Europe, can you give us an example of one network interacting with another network to create that network of networks?
Yeah, I mean, just a simple example is you're a bank who has who's a participant of a trade network like WeTrade, and there's 12 banks in there, let's just say, and you're doing trade finance and all the stuff around that, supply chain, etc. in that network of 12. But then you've got a customer who uses bank number 14, which is on a completely different network. And so you're automatically limiting your customer. So as a bank, the company that's your customer, you're limiting servicing them. And so that customer gets annoyed and changes banks, and they go to another bank that can support them. So that's what we're solving, that the business problem by interconnecting, you're allowing people to be able to trade across networks and across silos of networks. and finance is a great use case for that.
Got it. So breaking down those barriers through blockchain. Now, I want to talk to you quickly about something that's come up really recently. I know you've got to go, so I've got to rush through some of these questions. But Block One recently was hit with a fine. Possibly there may be cease and desist orders come through connected to EOS, as you know. Are you concerned at all, Gil, in the future of those SEC parties or regulators looking at those ICOs that happened across the board and knocking on the door and saying, hey, look, you started it this way, much as they've done with EOS. Are you concerned at all about being deemed a security in any way?
No, I mean, we've done this, as I said, right at the beginning with KPMG, under FINMA guidelines. We have compliance and we're within the remit of Switzerland for that. We purposely did not sell to any US citizens. They were all banned. All the KYC that we did, we had nothing in the US in advice and in line with what KPMG said. And it's been that way, and they're happy, our regulator's happy. So no.
Okay, awesome. Because you've got to go, I'm going to go faster now,
Yep.
Gil. Now, with regard to your token, I want to talk frankly about manipulation metrics. You're ranked about 60th right now. Quant supply, roughly about 14.6 mil. Circ supply is 12 mil. First question is scarcity. We hear that as an asset right across the board. We hear it with Bitcoin, for example. Do you feel like you have excessive scarcity? You don't have a lot when we talk about 14.6 mil, Gil. That's not a lot, for this kind of global scale, and obviously inherent in that is a reasonable suggestion that there will be considerable value over time of your token. You can't comment on that, but I certainly can make allusions to that idea. Have you got it right with your metrics? Do you think that 14.6 mil total supply is on the money?
Yeah, I mean, we set out, and that's what we achieved with that. And the Quant token is 18 decimals, so from a future-proof perspective, we think it's the right size for where we're going and the market that we're in.
Okay, so we can liken that to Bitcoin to Sats. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got a lot of potential scope because of that divisibility. Now, with regard to the use case, can you just comment on this? Licensing, fees, the gateways, are they the predominant sort of means in which we can guarantee that there is that true and verifiable utility inbound and built into the token?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the only models that I've seen that really supports different market segments. And we're catering for enterprise, we're catering for open source, for community, for developers. And it is we're calling a universal utility token. You need it to access the platform. You need it for all the transactions. And without it, no transaction can flow because it's not signed, it's not verified, it's not encrypted, etc. So yeah, I think we've got it right.
Okay, Gil, now tough question, mate, and I can't really apologize for this because it has to be asked. The lack of correlation right across the board of crypto between token and the business models that we're presented with. For the most part, there's just a real dearth of this, mate. What are your comments with regard to those rightly saying, look, we understand you're a real business, we understand you have a pre-utility token or a utility token now that's really trying to drive your ecosystem, but speculation really stuffs it up. How can we ensure that there is trust in the trustless system, trust in a unique model that we're starting to see emerge now to try and reformulate business when we see speculation literally changing the outcomes of the token, the value of the token. Currently it's sitting around $6, whatever. But being real about this, Gil, if people are looking at this as a real point of value, what do you say to people who ask you the question of, the volatility, the trust of, understanding how all this works?
Yeah, I mean, we're all about the ecosystem that we're building around this, and the adoption around what we've got as a technology and now as a network. It's not dissimilar to Microsoft, and I've been reading a lot in previous on MBA courses and whatever in case studies, but we've taken a leaf out of the Microsoft book. We've built the operating system, which is Overledger OS. And now we've built the ecosystem around it, which is the network, which is what Azure is. And then on top of all of this, you can build your own products on top, which is what Office and Visio and all the Microsoft products on top do. It is the 21st century Microsoft, our playbook, and it's all powered by our operating system, which is reliant and needs the token to operate, and it fuels the ecosystem around it.
Right. But Gil, because it's monetized though, mate, I mean, just to pull it back, so I really get this clear, is that because speculation is an element of crypto, not necessarily built into the system you created, because it is one of enterprise, but because it does exist and because exchanges exist, does it ever concern you that there's a coupling effect with the broader, more macro crypto sort of startups? And the fact that we see correlations of movement between Bitcoin, for example, and all the altcoins, it's difficult to watch, to be honest, because we do want to see decoupling. We do want to see clearer correlations between your growth as a business and that fuel, which is your utility.
Yeah, I mean, look, this market's maturing. It's still early days. All this cowboy stuff will go. I don't think crypto exchanges will survive. Just to put it out there, I think regulation has caught up, and it's stipulating a lot of stringent requirements. We saw that in Germany, where the government said anyone who does any crypto exchange stuff has to have KYC and comply with security, same as a traditional exchange. So I think the days are numbered for crypto exchanges, because institutional exchanges, traditional exchanges, can easily list Bitcoin, they can easily list Ethereum, and provide the regulatory wrapper around it, and then you've got access to institutions and asset managers and hedge funds and pension funds and whatever buying this type of asset. It's just another asset to them. It's just like a derivative.
Gil, that's a perfect segue, mate, because you listed all the reasons why those mainstream exchanges would certainly consider you a digital asset in the future. So, mate, are you looking more towards those kinds of exchanges in the future? I ask because I've always wondered, why haven't you listed with other prominent crypto exchanges? We don't need to name names, but certainly you haven't. You have most of your volume on I think it's Hotbit, or I'm not sure, but it's one of those questionable ones that you certainly didn't list yourself. And then you see Bithumb as another one that's got a lot of the volume. So to be frank, are you focused more on the mainstream sector and those exchanges for legitimacy and value regulation?
Yeah, the traditional institutional players are compliant. They're real. They give you an assurance, and they're professional because they have to be. We're seeing a lot of behavior that just doesn't gel with us, and we're not going there. We're conscious of our clients, and our clients wouldn't want us to be associated with that type of behavior at all.
Right. So, Gil, what can we expect? What can we expect, given that you're so staunch about this, and I appreciate that you're focused on that, legitimacy and that regulation. What can we see in the future? What do we expect with regard to interacting with exchanges? Just paint us a bit of a picture so we understand how that will look.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's already happened. SIX, which is a Swiss exchange, regulated, in Switzerland. They operate on, traditional securities and other things. They've launched SDX. It's their digital asset exchange, and we're going to see much more of that. And there's the stuff with Gemini, and they're going down that path as well. So we're seeing a lot of traditional players doing the crypto asset, digital asset space. Because there's a market need, and they're doing it properly and professionally, which is the right way to do it.
Right. And what about your treasury model, Gil? We talked about in the past. I have a question from the community with regard to modeling itself, or your token modeling. And they've asked, is there any modeling on token sequestration by the treasury? Now, that's a tough question. I'm hoping you understand it better than I do, but essentially it's just looking at the treasury model. How are you ensuring that you're really securing the value of the treasury as you build out this network?
Yeah, I mean, once the Overledger network's live and the treasury is part of that, you'll be able to see that, because it's all going to be, public and open source and running on smart contracts, and it's all going to be on blockchain. So people will be able to do their own modeling. They'll see it.
Okay. Now, just quickly touching on the questions of locked and unlocked tokens, I want to just clarify, are there any team tokens that are unlocked? There was a question about whether or not there was a substantial percentage of price movement because of the sudden team unlock. So I just want to clarify from you, what you'd like to say to any rumors suggested that, there was some back-end movement because of team activity.
Yeah, no, the team does not have access to the company tokens. I mean, it's the company reserve. It's there in line with the business paper, and this is what we did like from day one. It's there to help build the ecosystem and fuel it, and that's what we've been doing. So no one can get access to Quant and do whatever they want with it. It's the companies for the ecosystem. Okay,
and I appreciate that. Now, Colin Patterson, the CTO, Jean-Paul, the chief architect, I just want to clarify with you, there's suggestions they've left the team, Gil. Firstly, is that correct? And secondly, can you comment on that further, if that is?
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, they left. Yeah, that was back in June. Mm-hmm. You start something. They were one of the early staff to join, we got to a level, they delivered what was needed, and now we're going up a level, and now we've got another team that's geared for where we need to go. Right. And so, there's no hard feelings, and they're moving on to other things. I think Colin's doing a degree or something, and Jebby's doing something else. So,
can I ask you though, Gil? I don't want to be rude. Can I ask you though? Yeah. It's a little bit personal, but were you surprised that they left, given that you are just at the beginning phase of this business, and that clearly you're making moves in the right direction, I would assume, given what you're saying? It's just a bit perplexing to hear, and me especially, having spoken to you a few times now, that people would opt to leave now.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is how companies operate, and like any other startup, you go through a churn of people and cycles of people. I'm very close to our board and our advisors, and this is normal. This is the same with every other company that goes through this in other sectors, not just in technology. It's the normal cycle of business. When you're starting out, you're going to go through a lot of people until you scale up and go to the next level, and then you're going to go through another churn of people, and then you've got to go. It's just the nature of companies, like any other company. We're one of them.
Sure, I appreciate that. And you have new members, as you mentioned, with Stephen and Dr. Riley as well. So I'll try and follow up with each time we talk and looking at the changes in your team. Now, I just want to touch on Hyperledger for a moment really quickly. I know you've got to go. But with regard to just understanding the depths, once again, of this partnership, because there's been some suggestions in the community that they perhaps don't quite understand. Some have been suggesting that it's really just a superficial partnership. So what is the true nature of Hyperledger and Quant? And I ask you this in the context of Colin, because Colin, through looking at the tweets and looking at that, he was going to lead out a key role in Hyperledger with Quilt. So can you just let us know what's going on there, Gil?
Yeah, as I said, we're Hyperledger members, like all the other members that are part of that ecosystem. We're helping shape the thinking in terms of what Fabric should be doing, and there's a lot of internal calls that we have. There's about 3 every week that we can attend. Mm-hmm. What we're doing with Quilt is looking at how we can help with our technology, allow Quilt and interoperability to happen at scale, because there was an approach before, which was the first iteration of Quilt. There's been a lot of changes. The project slowed down a bit last year sometime. And we joined this year to help with it, and that's what we're doing. So there's a lot of internal discussions on how we can help shape what Hyperledger looks like and all the other projects. So there's Identity, there's Bisu now with Pantheon that just joined, which is an Ethereum, and we're part of that group that helps with the thinking, and we're contributing as much as we can. So. It's being decided. We don't. No one knows. No one's confirmed and committed of what everything should look like. where it's work in progress, and we're all working on it together.
I see. So you're part of that conversation. Now, with regard to offices, an odd question perhaps, but people were asking about transparency with regard to not only the office that you have in London, as I understand, but also just, with regard to office plans of the future, whether that be in the US or other regions, Gil. Can people, for example, be aware of the address and see more of an insight into the office with regard to productivity, the activity, the buzz? How much transparency are you willing to give of these regions in terms of address and location?
No, I mean, that's only for our clients. We're not going to publicize, stuff that we it's need to know. Sorry, we just come from a security background. So it's for our clients when we have our meetings. We obviously have our meetings in our office, so our clients come here. So if people are clients, we definitely meet, or we go to their site. It's just the way it is.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, with regard to more regulation, you had a recent meeting with 5 AMLD. You often are engaged in conversations regarding regulation, regardless of where you are. So are you confident that you are really meeting the needs globally with all of the compliance and the regulations as you continue to build?
Yeah, I mean, the FCA wanted to meet with us to discuss, the 5th anti-money laundering directive and how they can, supervise and do things in line with the new regulation that's coming in. And we're advising them, So we're there with the regulators, providing our experience and our expertise and helping them understand this space and helping them to do their job better. So. Short answer is yes. We're part of the policies that are being developed. I gave an example before, and we're part of the peer group that the regulators call upon to ask for help.
Right. And Gil, in Europe, Eva Cayley, she suggested that there needs to be a fair fintech space. Do you support that idea, of an unbiased, transparent, and fair fintech system that people can, essentially engage in for the better?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thinking's already there with sandboxes and allowing, the authorities to provide a safe space to try fintech and to try new things without the overhead of lots of regulation, but there is some regulation. And that model's worked. And I know the EU are talking about, sandbox harmonization. So if you have a sandbox in one country, you can recognize that in another, so you don't have to go through the whole process again. And having that across borders is great because you can innovate in the large market and you could do stuff that's super interesting.
Right.
And fintech is here to stay. It's challenging the system and it's innovating in new ways that's helping consumers and people.
Right. And Gil, one of the things we've always talked about is that standard system that you created. There's been, some researchers come to me and say, Brad, can you please, extrapolate on this, really dig deep and find out what the true nature of Gil's role is. So I wanted to ask you that, but also more importantly, ask you that in the context of products that are emerging because of the standards that you've built. Can you just address, your specific role with the ISO, TC 307 standards and also what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I, started the standard, the ISO standard back in 2015. I saw the need to create a blockchain ISO standard. And if you know technology, standards are a way you can have, in a level playing field and, innovation happen because standards foster growth. And so I authored the proposal to have an ISO standard back in 2014. It got sent to the committee to get approval, and that happened in 2015. I think it was October 2015. And all the original diagrams and the architecture was all based on my idea for an overlay, which is what Overledger is. So doing, founding the standard and kicking that off was also in line with what I wanted to build with Overledger. So it led to the idea of Overledger. So that was 2015. It got kicked off and approved, and then we had the first meeting in Sydney in 2016, which was the first plenary. So I'm head of delegation for the UK. So I chair the committee for the UK and represent the UK internationally at the ISO meetings. And then globally, I'm also, it's called the convener, the chair of the interpretability group, which is SG7. And so I have calls every few weeks, and we hold the meetings, and we're all solving interoperability, and I chair that.
Right, and that's a real position of power, clearly, Gil, because we're talking about the SG7, we're talking about alliances across the globe. That's a big deal. Now, one of the things that, again, there's been potentially FUD about in APA. I'm sure you've heard of it yourself. So can you also just comment on that with regard to not only your several roles you play there, but the legitimacy of the connections between Quant and INAPA with regard to forging real and lasting connections and partnerships?
Yeah, I don't know what people understand or what they expect, but we're a founding member of INATBA. I mean, that's quite clear. I don't know why they can't understand that bit. And what it means is you're in the committee. There was 104 founding members. We're one of them, and now there's more people joining, and so we're all working together, and it's people from all different companies, governments all around the world, part of INAPA, and we're all working on different working groups to bring real world applications of blockchain, to the industry.
I appreciate that, Gil, for that clarification. I'm sorry that I'm asking some of these obvious questions to you, but it's just so we can have you on record. Let us know. Now, with regard to the Fed's Secure Payment Task Force, you mentioned that before. That's a big deal also with regard to some of the key developments you've made. Can you just comment a bit more about the foundations, commenting on that you're laying those foundations, not just for the UK, but beyond those borders as well, with regard to establishing a fast payment solution system?
Yeah, so I was, in that committee because of my CISO role, for all the payments infrastructure for the UK. I met the guys from the Fed at a conference I spoke at, which was in San Fran, RSA. It was a security conference, and they said, "Do you want to join? Can you be part of this? And we'd love to have that background and that input into the thinking." And I said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely." So I went to many meetings and there's 13 Feds, so they're all around the US. So it's not just the New York, but there's Boston Fed, there's Carolina, North Carolina, all around the US. And so we had lots of meetings in different Feds, and my job was bringing the background and the expertise, and from the cybersecurity angle of how payments run and work in Europe, in the UK, and helping shape the thinking and the policies in the US, which is being developed back then. And so some of that, as I said before, is already happening, and it's become the way the Fed is running and the policies they've been putting in. And it's quite exciting to see, from a concept to being implemented.
Right, well, there's a lot happening there, Gil. One of the things I did want to touch on before you go is just, ironically, an aspect of trust, given that you're so focused on building part of this trustless network that we see emerge now. But when it comes to things like 4chan, for example, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but just these media networks that happen sort of behind the scenes. And then we look at frontline media entities like Forbes, for example. I wanted to just find out from you what your thoughts are leading out Quant with regard to the quality of media in crypto. Should we be really careful with trusting some of these sources, because not everything is in your control. We've seen that with some of the exchange listings that happen, that choose to list Quant beyond your oversight or your control. So those kinds of entities, are you concerned by them as you're trying to build this? Or with regard to Forbes, for example, is this something you engage with regularly?
Yeah, I mean, no. So you can't pay attention to all the noise, and our clients don't. I mean, none of our clients know anything about 4chan and YouTube videos of the shilling types of people and
pump and dumps, that sort of stuff.
What are the those? I don't even know what you call them. None of our clients pay attention to that, know what it is, or even care. I mean, to be frank, what they do is, they look at the problem they want to solve. They read tier 1 media. Forbes is one. We're going to be in another tier 1 very shortly in the next few weeks. We were at Cybos. We've done quite a few tier 1 media interviews there. They value what industry experts say. And Gartner is the number one go-to place, and they only read Gartner and Forrester and the likes, and they don't have time to go find 4chan channels and watch. I mean, they don't have time to sit at their office and watch YouTube videos. It doesn't happen.
Right. But Gil, I ask you this because a lot of the speculators do care, and obviously we have to acknowledge that too, because many of them do have the token or do take part in this interesting and nascent time that we see emerge. Now, given that, I wanted to also ask you about market making beyond your control, because we just don't know. We don't know what forces are at play especially given that you have such a limited supply. Does it ever concern you that there is the risks of manipulation beyond your control for that token? Or do you even care, given that you're just so focused on doing real business and building out this very, very robust system that is, for decades to come?
Yeah, I mean, look, to be brutally frank, that type of speculation, manipulation, it exists in the stock exchanges of the world, right? I mean, insider trading on stock exchanges has been, solved through better regulation. Speculation and all that stuff is solved by better regulation through better disclosure. You have to disclose before you can comment on a particular stock or something. Right. So I think that's coming. All that better regulation is coming to that crypto space. And it's just a matter of time when all that noise and stuff will disappear, because you won't be able to do those things like the manipulation and all that stuff that happens somewhere. You can't do that on a traditional stock exchange because of all the controls that have been put in, mandated by regulation. And I think all of those are coming to this space. So
right, and Gil, you've made it really clear.
It's outside of my control.
Yes, and you've made it also very clear that you're focused on engaging with solely and wholly those that are regulation-centric, those that want to make sure that they are by the book, as you are. So I appreciate your clarification there, and it's also clear right now when you look at the kind of movement of the wider space, there are certain question marks at the very least with regard to market movement. But as you're suggesting, that's going to change in the future as we see regulation strengthening. So Gil, I wanted to finish off. Obviously, it's been a very detailed interview. But mate, is there anything with any particular vertical, say for example health, or in any area at all, that you really wanted to address as a key area that has empirical evidence that there's real use cases, real means of adoption for Quant, so we move it back to the real value of what you're building?
Yeah, I mean, the spaces that I mentioned before that we're covering, it's been mainly financial services focused. That's a given. We're doing a lot in government. Sustainability is that new one, which is super exciting, and there's an announcement coming out on that. And there's lots of global stakeholders that are part of that announcement. We're doing stuff around trade finance and then supply chain, how to interconnect entities. And then there's use cases where governments want to give control back to people on how they manage their identity and manage the data and the personal data, the private data, personal information. And that's what we've been working on with, in Japan, out of all places. So, right. I mean, there's new areas that our technology is being utilized, and it's quite exciting to see it, because they're coming to us and saying, "Can you guys do this?" And we go through it, and it's always, yeah, we probably can, and then we look into it, and then we come up with a way to do it. But I think moving forward, I think we're making digital assets interoperable, and that is kind of the holy grail of this space, and the stuff in capital markets and what's coming down the pipe with that. That's going to be huge.
Yes, and I couldn't have said it better myself. The capital market move, we're talking about the trading that you were talking about earlier on in the interview. That is a big deal. Your allusions to the US and the market movement there, that's all coming. There's so much that you don't say in our interviews that, always interests me for the next one, Gil, and I really do appreciate your time. I also wanted to acknowledge some people who did contribute to some questions. Thank you to David W. I'm not sure of his surname, but he certainly contributed to some great questions. Thanks to the Quant community in their telegrams. Thanks also to Eye of Quant and many others as well who contribute very enthusiastically as we provide these key free interviews. Thank you again, Gil, for your time. I hope it's been of value to the community and even to people beyond that as we start to really showcase the real deal when it comes to integrating blockchain, crypto, and the wider sphere of business. You certainly are suggesting that there's so much more to be had. There's so much more to do. You're busy. You've taken time out of your day, and I appreciate that, mate. Just one final comment. What would you like to say to all of those people who are considering the legitimacy of the blockchain, of crypto? You know, what's your final message to all of us?
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of that, and you know, we're seeing people using blockchain without even knowing it, and that's where we should be. There's a lot of space in insurance, again in financial services. Things are happening in the background. Settlements are done in the background, and it's run on blockchain, and you don't know, and you don't care because it just happens. You know, and as an end user, that's exciting because you know, we're changing the way people work and companies work and things operate in the financial system and health system, whatever. That's exciting because we're seeing it being implemented and it's live. There's going to be more of this. It's right at the beginning.
Well, certainly, as you suggested, I'll be calling you, Gil, in November when we hear more about some of those big moves you're making. But until then, I wish you all the very best for you, for your team. Thank you for those insights that we simply would never get if you were a mainstream business pre-blockchain. So thanks, mate, again for your time. We really appreciate that. I wish you all the very best.
And thank you, Brad. Thanks for taking the time and thanks for the flexibility. So appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, mate.